Hello, everyone, and welcome to Making Your Digital Mark. I am Lisa Apolinsky, content coach and creator, and America's digital content futurist. And I'm very, very excited to have on one of my clients and someone where I actually appeared on his podcast, Chris Gilman. Chris, welcome.
Well, thank you, Lisa. This is a pleasure. Enjoying
Yeah,
myself today. And as you know, I love to do podcasts. This is
yes.
wonderful.
Yes. So if you could just quickly introduce yourself to our audience, let them know what you do, who you work with.
Sure. I do a lot of things, but primarily I'm a business coach that works with contractors and subcontractors who want to let go but stay in the know and eventually become hard hat to a CEO in their
Ah,
business.
I love that. I love that. And that is something that I think a lot of contractors, construction firms want to do. They want to really lean into the CEO portion of their business instead of having to constantly be in the hard hat with the steel toe boots on the ground working. They
Well, I
actually like
also
to, yeah.
absolutely no, I also own a construction company and I do that with my team. And it's nice. And they actually appreciate it sometimes when I don't show up. So
Yeah. I'm sure. I'm sure. That's awesome. So, what we're going to be talking about today, and I just want to state this for our viewers and my followers that you started your original podcast, A Titan's Tale, this year, and it has
yes.
grown tremendously. And the type of people you've had on it have been spectacular. Um, if you're not, if you're not following and subscribing to Chris's LinkedIn feed, to his podcast, do it. The amount of information you're going to get and the people that he has on are so amazing. You're going to get stuff every single time you listen to it. So I highly recommend that you do that. And I will make sure that I include those links in the description for this webinar recording so people can quickly and easily subscribe to your podcast. So I just wanted to put that out there. But so one of the reasons why I asked you to be on this webinar, other over other podcast hosts that I have worked with and been on, is you seem to have a really amazing structure of how you find people, ask them to come on, how you help them to prepare, and then what they should do after the podcast recording is done, because it's not just showing up and doing the podcast and going, bye-bye. It's it's actually doing stuff after the fact and leveraging the podcast recording on both ends. So
Absolutely.
I want to start with asking when someone is looking to get on a podcast, whether it's yours or another podcast in their area of expertise, in their area of genius. What are some things that you're looking for to say, yes, this person would be perfect to be on my podcast? What are some things you're looking for in the communication?
Well, I want to know their background and at least links to their social media or something like that so I can kind of get a grasp of their background. So I can say, well, how would I, as a host, I guess, spin it in a way that my listeners could learn from it?
Right.
And that is not always possible because just some things don't make sense. But you can get creative sometimes. And I think creativity adds to the um, adds to the episode
Hmm.
because sometimes they like a little variety. But you always have to have a common theme in your podcast. So we talk about, staying in the know or letting go and staying in the know. How can that happen? And I'm always asking myself what my listeners would want me to ask for them. So
Right.
I look at the person who's applying to be a guest and say, well, what kind of questions would I ask them and would be valuable to my listeners? So links to their information. There's always some questions that a good host will have in their application process. So a lot of those different types of things, I believe, are a
Yeah.
good way.
Yeah. And it sounds like if they're leaving it to you, the host, to figure out how they can fit into the podcast, they actually could get passed up. They really need to provide you with some sort of, link
There-
or red line that
yeah.
says, this is why I looked at your podcast. This is what I'm hoping to provide for your audience.
Hmm.
And that's
Be
why I think,
proactive. Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I think I should be on your show. And I think when you and I connected, I believe that's what I did, that I said,
Hmm.
this is something that I do, and I can see your audience benefiting from it by using it this way. And that helps to really make that connection as to why you should even speak to them. Because I'm sure you get, you know,
All kinds
dozens
of,
of
yeah.
guest applications a week, hundreds a
You have,
month. Yeah,
as a host, and sometimes we like to be lazy. Most That's kind of a human nature thing. It does help when you get. Sometimes I want to know, well, what would I ask you? What do you want to talk about? Or what's your expertise? Because sometimes I can't always see that in the branding that they've established. Or there's a way
yeah,
to, how would you spin it to my, if you knew my customer, how would you spin it to my customer? That'll help me ask the right questions for you because it's a win-win situation. You're coming on, it's a promotion. I mean, what it really is. Um, Obviously, I'm not Joe Rogan, but
right.
but I do have a listenership, and you want to get in front of them. You want to be known, so we want to make this win-win for both of those.
Yeah. And I
So
love how you say you need to be clear about your area of genius and what you bring to the table. Don't expect me to try to figure it out if you haven't really just
absolutely, yeah,
stated it outright. And I giggled because that's something you and I have talked about, and
yeah,
just making sure that it's it's very clear of who you serve and what problem you solve. I mean, at least get those two down, if nothing else. Yeah,
absolutely,
absolutely.
and that it it's in your best interest and their best interest, whoever's listening, is that you do that, and you're not wasting your time, not wasting the podcaster's time. Um,
Right.
I made mistakes too, and decided, boy, is that guy really the person I want my listeners listening to? But as a host, I'm always trying to bring it back to the main point of the podcast. How is this bringing it in? We're always trying to, and I like to think of things that they're asking, and I'll refer to my guest. Well, I'm my avatar, and I'll say that. And
Mhm.
how would you do that for me, or what would you do in this case? And be prepared for those types of questions. And sometimes host, I'm not that way because I'm a little different probably, but because I like having a discussion, an open discussion. I don't want you I got some basic questions. I don't want you prepared questions, but some
Right.
hosts do want the prepared questions. So if you have them, send those along too. Hey, here's some ideas you can ask me during our interview.
Mhm.
And I think the host would appreciate that,
Yeah,
or at least
absolutely.
give them a basis to maybe change the question up a little bit, but have some guides on if they need some help.
Right. And I think it's important to note that podcast hosts are not looking to do a gotcha moment. They want it to be a smooth, great conversation that provides a ton of value for the podcast hosts listeners, because that's what you're tapping into. You're tapping into the podcast hosts community. So they're not doing it to try to mess you up. They really want you to do well and succeed so that when the listener listens to that episode, each time it's of value and they're like, yeah, that was a great episode for sure. And I've had it where some podcast hosts have asked for questions in advance, and sometimes they take that and they go a different direction, and I'm okay with that. Sometimes they actually just read them verbatim, which is
Yeah.
okay. And I actually did a
It's not as
podcast.
effective, I don't think, but
Yeah, I
that's
don't think
them.
I mean, it's like you said, kind of lazy, but at least there's a conversation going. And then
Hmm.
I did a podcast yesterday and I had no idea what we were going to talk about. And I mean, we ended up talking for 30 minutes back and forth. And then he's like, this was awesome. And I have a bunch of questions that I didn't even get to. We need to do a part two. And I was like, okay, that sounds
Yeah.
awesome. So you just never know.
I kind of want it like you're in one of those parties and two people are talking and you're trying to and you come up and you kind of hear what they're talking about and then you become interested in what they're talking about. And that's kind of how I see my listeners who said, okay, we're having a very deep conversation about this topic. And in case we're letting you know what the topic's about before you even show up.
Right.
And here you come, and we're having this deep conversation, and we're learning from each other. And in that fact, I tell my guests, and I've told you, it's like we're gonna have a discussion today. We have an idea what we're going to talk about, but I don't have a. You're going to say something that's going to make me think of something else.
Right.
Then it's my job to lead that next lead that's interesting to our listeners. So
Yes. Yes. Because no, I mean, your listeners better than I would as a guest. So I need to trust you in order to have the best conversation for the audience. Absolutely. Um, let's talk. So we kind of moved into the actual recording and the conversation itself. Is there anything, I hate to state it this way, but I think it'll be interesting. Is there anything that a guest does that you're like, "Hmm, please don't do that"? Is there anything that has ever happened where you're like, if I could put out a public service announcement here, please don't do X, or please make sure you have Y. Like, I think one of the most important things, if you're going to get onto a podcast, invest in a good mic. Have a good
yeah,
microphone. Audio is the most important thing.
audio is the most important. If you're going to record, um, turn off your tabs. And I try to do some of this stuff in advance. Tell them, prep them, say, here's what you need to do.
Hmm.
Um, I can look up on my computer all day long. My computer says I have very fast internet. But for some reason, something locks up.
Right.
It could be your computer. I got a brand new computer when I started out because I didn't want any junk on it that I use just for podcasting and um, just turn everything off.
Hmm.
It's just me and you. Turn your phone off. Um, Not that I've ever had any. Most people know that, but in case, just it's just a conversation between me and you, and us only. And there's no reason for interruption. Um, as a host, I need to focus on you, and then as a guest, you probably need to focus on me,
Right.
and that's important. The other thing that I would say is a good discussion goes both ways.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes, if it's a really good guest and we're having a good discussion, and some people say, I'm talking too much. No, no, you're doing well. I want people like stories. And if
Yeah.
you got stories, tell the stories. And don't be telling a story just for telling a story, but if it
Right.
has something to do with the topic we're talking about, I'm going to let you go
Yeah.
because you're my expert here on this particular subject.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to tell the story. Don't be afraid to deep in. I've had a couple guests say, "Well, I've never been asked that," and I'm trying to be different as a host from my competing podcast.
Right.
And media podcasting is that we're not really competitors because you can go to that one just as easy on mine and you can save it and blah blah blah. Listen to it anytime. It ain't like prime time TV where you got to fight for a time. With that being said, be aware of what's going on. That you this is it is a production in a sense, and you're just as important to the production as I am, and
Yep.
we go back and forth. So,
Yep. I totally agree with that. And so where I live now, is very rural. There's very little traffic, and I don't get people knocking on the door soliciting. That is not norm for this area. And I always do all my interviews, all my webinars, all my podcasts, everything from my home.
mhm.
It's just easiest for me. And the last place where I lived, it was like Solicitor Row. I have no idea why, but I would get people knocking on the door, ringing the doorbell all the time. And so I actually had to take, I had a really large, I paint as part of my, trying to like relax and let my creative side of my brain kind of work versus my analytical side. And so I paint,
Hmm.
and I had a massive easel, and I would put a sign on it and block my front door that basically said live interview in progress. If you can read this, you're too close. Please step away from the door. And I had to put that out. Otherwise, I had people ringing the bell, knocking on the door,
Yeah.
hearing me in the office and knocking on the window. I mean, it was psychotic. So it's
Well,
okay to put physical barriers in front of your home as well. There's nothing wrong with that.
I wouldn't go this far, but in photography, I took photography, and then in radio, there's always lights go on that, hey, we're recording or we're developing, and it's the same concept. I have a
Yeah.
note on the door right now, recording,
Yeah.
and everybody knows, leave Chris alone,
Right.
and that's okay, and that's part of it. That is our job,
Yeah.
and I'm doing this from my office, but there's times where I have meetings at home,
Hmm.
and my grandkids are the worst. They don't quite understand
Your
grandpa
grandkids
talk.
are amazing.
Yeah, I know. And they
I
come
have met
in
them.
like
They're
it's part of,
wonderful.
yeah. Oh, I was like, okay. And it actually makes a nice part of the host podcast. It makes it feel real that we're
Yeah.
just human beings too.
Yeah.
But for the most part, we don't want to be interrupted.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And,
Because you don't want to
we're
lose the
focusing.
flow of the conversation.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
So they are, as I love them, can be distracting, as cute as
Yeah.
they are. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get that. And I also would say if something does happen, because it's happened to me, I had someone, I had canceled the cleaner for the day, and somehow she didn't get the
miscommunication.
message.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle of a live webinar, and she's knocking on the door, and I had to stop and open it because she was not, she was like, is everything okay? And we just, the facilitator just kind of spoke a little bit while I dealt with that really fast, and I came back in and I'm like, okay. And that's life. I mean,
Things happen.
things happen. I
Um,
think about that interview, on BBC where the kids came into the room. They opened the door and the two kids came
oh,
into the room while he's
mm-hmm.
on live television. And then his wife came running in trying to grab the kids. That was hilarious. But it's like one of the most watched videos of all time because it's like, yeah, that happens. What can you
Well,
do? I mean, kids are going to be kids, dogs are going to be dogs.
I told you earlier, and I'll tell it real quick. I have Bell's palsy. If you know what that is, it's going to go away, but my face droops and my tongue doesn't work like I had a stroke. But I'm here today and I have to. It's just part of it. You asked the other day, are we still on? Absolutely. I'm going to be there. I did a podcast last week. You know, um, it just happens.
Yeah.
Now, fortunately for me, it's going to go away, but you got to keep moving on. It's if we own a business or whatever it is, you got to make it happen. Now, I'm sure there's some extremes, and I did the week I had the Bell's palsy. I went ahead and scheduled because it was worse, and I rescheduled some appointments.
Right.
But people are flexible; they know it. With technology, we can kind of be anywhere to do this, and it's very fortunate that we have the ability to do that. But
Yeah, absolutely.
it is what it
Absolutely.
is, and things
Yep.
happen.
And I
Make the
am
best
I
of
am
it.
saying prayers for a fast recovery for you for sure. Yeah. I'm
Thank
glad it
you.
was nothing else.
Absolutely, me too.
And I'm glad it was nothing else. Um, yeah, absolutely. And that also ties into when you're on a podcast. If you Have you ever had a podcast guest who was like nervous and kind of stumbling over their words or was struggling? Have you ever experienced that, or has everyone, been kind of like, don't worry about the recording, we're just having a conversation, and then they just talked?
For the most part, no. Um, I did have one, and I didn't really notice it. I had a gentleman burp, and just a
Oops.
belch, and then it just happened.
Yeah.
And I really probably didn't catch it. I just, went on, and but my team had edited the video, and we sent it out, and they were listening to it before we. And he said, "Hey, Chris, at this point, there's this noise. Can you get rid of it?" Yeah.
Yeah.
So those type of things, as a production, it is production as a group. I like to go through it. I have a team that does that and so forth. I've even listened to my own podcast sometimes, and I don't like them because I've already been part of it. I know what's going to happen. I
Right.
know what they're going to say,
Right.
so I don't listen to them as much as I do occasionally if I really was intrigued or I want to remember something. But I've listened to yours, Lisa, for 5 times at least. I'm sure, but not everybody else I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But no, those things happen. I don't. I've asked some questions sometimes that take people by surprise, and it wasn't intentional. They tell me that a good host, that's what you want. You want the silence. You want the gravity of the conversations. Like, ooh, you stumped them. And I'm not there to stump them. I'm there
Right.
to make them. And or at least I think as a guest, I would, and I go, I obviously I'm here. I go on as a guest too. I get tired of the same questions. It's like a redundant, don't you?
Yes. Oh my God, I so do. I so
It's like
do. Um,
I want it to be
yeah.
enjoyable for the guest. I
Yeah.
mean, I
Yeah.
want you to have a. In some ways, I don't. You don't prepare for discussion when you go to these parties or whatever you go to and
Right.
mingle. That's what I wanted. And so, yeah, we're going to talk about things. We're, um, I bring family up sometimes, but family is part of my pitch as far as, you're going to let go.
Right.
Um,
Oh, for sure.
why are you going to let go? You want the family. You want more family time. So a lot of that stuff plays into but you cover the gamut. And we're going to be talking about, because when you go to places where you mingle, so what do you do? Well, what do you do? And we get into that conversation. So,
Huh. What do you do? What do you do? What
yeah,
do you
yeah,
do? Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's why
Well,
I asked talk about who you work with. It's not what do you
yeah,
do? Who do you work with?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Who do you work with? That's a perfect idea because at the end of the day, you're mingling for a reason. And if you can find a lead or a connection or a part, I mean, a lot of different things. But that's the idea, to interact with each other, to learn, to grow, move forward, and help each other move forward. So,
Right. Right. Absolutely. Excuse me. And
uh-huh.
always have water. I forgot my water. Always have water when you're on a
Yeah,
podcast.
ask me. I
Let
got my
me throw
coffee
that
here.
in. I
Okay.
totally forgot my
Yeah.
water, and my boyfriend is gone, so I can't have him bring something in, but that's okay.
Oh,
I
oh,
will
oh,
live.
I have one. I do
Hmm.
this, and it sounds silly. Go to the bathroom before the
Yes.
appointment.
Yes. Right
I mean, it
before.
sounds silly,
Yeah.
but if you have to go to the restroom, your mind's not thinking right. It's got other
Yeah.
priorities in place.
Yeah. You just
Get
want
ready.
the conversation to be over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just,
Yeah. Are
just,
we done now? Okay, bye.
yeah. I'll
Yeah.
see you later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Exactly.
yeah, it sounds silly, but it's true.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I love it when people are on time.
Yes. And in fact, be early. Like you were on 10
5
minutes
minutes early is,
before,
yeah,
and
I
I
like
was
to be
like,
5 minutes early.
I'm late because I like to be on at least 10 minutes early. Because that way,
Yeah.
if there's a technical issue, I can fix it.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
as a host, I try to do that. Podcasts are a little bit more flexible, not quite, but versus a live where people are
Right.
expecting a certain time. That's probably important to know as a guest, that you find out from your host, how's this going to be a broadcast in the
Yes.
future, that day. Not that I want you to be late just because it's not live, but you know that's important to know because sometimes things happen. Um, I talk about doctor's appointments. You live rural, I live rural. I got X amount. Google says it's going to take X amount to get to this location, but doesn't account for traffic and other stuff. And
Right.
you're
Once you get
five or
into
10 minutes
town
late.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, gosh,
Hmm.
dang stoplights. So
I
anyway,
know. Stoplights. Ah.
yeah. Wow, you need those. But just things to
You're
think
right. I have
about.
no, there are no stoplights in my town. It's all stop signs. Yeah.
My little town's great, but I get to Columbia, 100,000 people, and it's like, oh my gosh, why do
Yeah.
people live here?
Yeah,
But anyway,
humanity. Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you talked about asking about how it's going to be broadcast, which is a perfect transition into my final question about what what can the guests do to really leverage the podcast recording, because it's not just you being able to share it with your audience, which is amazing, but your guests can be sharing it as well and helping promote it. So, what are some
Well,
things that you ask people to do?
um, I offer, I give them the copy and say, hey, share it, please, and snippets, but they should want to too. You should ask your host, or even before that, can I get a copy of it? And then you do your own promotion stuff, the
Mhm.
little reels and the
Yes.
whatever. And it goes both ways. And be honest with you, that host is going to want to because they have you on there. I'm just as interested in you going to my people as me going to your friends and family and followers on LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever. It's a
Right.
win-win situation. So cross promotion is really the key to podcasting, um, in my opinion, from a host point of view. You want it for the ego side. And I say ego, it's not. I mean, it is ego. For some people, it is ego.
Yeah.
For others, it's more of um, name recognition, the branding, as you obviously know, getting out there and the little snippets. I find myself watching more reels than I do videos, and that's
Yeah.
kind of the theme today, is that they're shorter and they can make you look brilliant because they're just.
Yeah, because it's
I
it's
mean,
it's hard to mess up in a 60-second clip. I mean,
take the politics that we've been used to right now. They take those snippets and turn it the negative or positive way.
right, right.
We want you to do the same thing. Take those little snippets and use it to your advantage
Yep.
and promote yourself, promote my podcast, obviously,
Yep.
and it goes both ways.
Yeah. And make sure, and I'm saying this out loud, make sure you tag your podcast host. I'll say that again.
Yes,
Make sure you tag your podcast host. They're not going to know that you posted something if you don't tag them and it comes up on their notification where then they can repost to their community. That is key.
we're going
And
to
I,
tag you, yeah, for
mhm,
sure,
yeah,
because we
absolutely.
want your stuff to be seen by your people.
Right, exactly. And I love what you were saying. So I I made I made a commitment at the beginning of the year that I would do more short form video for the year. And I finally did it last month because I was at a conference, Mark Schaefer's Uprising,
Hmm.
and I was with Aaron, one of my colleagues, and I tagged him on my first post, and I used Opus Clip. And I was, I don't know what my problem was. Actually, I do know what my problem was. So I am a product of horrible video editing from 20 years ago. And if you remember what we used to have to do to edit videos, where you'd have to sit there and you'd have to clip it and then you'd have to move it and then you'd have to
Hmm.
align it and you have to fade in and out and do all this manual work. And it was the worst experience ever. And so I still have that residual
But
memory.
yes,
I've blocked it mostly, but I have been so like, oh, I will not do it. And he was like, do it. And so I did it during the conference because he yelled at me to do it. And Aaron was absolutely right. And so when I used Opus Clip, and there are a ton of programs
oh,
out
there's all
there.
kinds.
I
Yeah.
mean, tons. It was so easy. I felt stupid for having resisted it. I was
Now I
like,
don't
oh
know
my
Opus
God, this is
Clip.
like a nothing. I barely had to do anything. I was like,
Did
this
it
is great.
did it add the text to it for you already too?
Uh-huh. It
Yeah,
added
yeah.
it added the closed caption. I could correct the closed caption if I wanted to. I put in a little fade in and a little fade out. If I'm really feeling fancy, I could add in branding at the front and back, which I'm not even doing. It took,
You're just yeah.
I mean, I
Get it
was
out
like,
there.
what was my problem? Well, because you know, I
Well,
remember how it used to
technology.
be,
Come on. Oh,
like
yeah.
carrier pigeon. And I'm like, I don't want to do that.
Well, I'm so shallow. I call it shallow. I like to. My wife says I love to delegate. I don't even want to do the Opus Clip. I want my virtual assistants to do it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't care what they use. Just use it, make it happen, and it's
Yeah.
done. But it's being done. That's what's important.
That's what's
And
important. Yeah.
yeah,
But
whether you're
now
doing it,
I'm,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, whether you use your virtual assistant, whether you do it yourself, and if you do it yourself, again, I am not tech savvy. I mean, I can code and stuff, but I was like, ooh, video production. That
hmm
feels like it's outside of my pay grade.
yeah,
And I was able to do it. And Opus Clip isn't even that expensive. I'm going to sign up for the full program.
yeah.
I did a seven day free trial. Not a big deal. Not a
No,
big
and there's
deal.
some out there I think are free. I think there might be a limit to the number you can use and a
Right.
time frame, but you know, okay, that's better than
Yeah.
nothing. If you're strapped for cash, do it.
Yeah.
Get
Yeah.
to a point where you can afford that
Right.
$10 a month in savings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because it saves you a bunch of time and it gives your followers something else to view in a different way. And LinkedIn likes those, those
Oh yeah.
vertical videos now too.
hmm
So, yeah, there's a lot of, and I'll be
And you
doing it
can
with
use them.
this. I'll be
You can
clipping
use
for this.
yeah. You can use them on all of them too, like
Hmm.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter,
Yeah.
Instagram. That's the one.
Yeah.
And they love them all.
Yeah.
And if you have software that you can do it manually, or they'll spit it out to them all at the same time. I
Yeah.
have programs do that, and it's
Yeah,
just
you can actually schedule it in there and it's
yeah.
like holy Christmas, holy bananas.
Now I'm
Yeah.
gonna let you in a little secret. There's
Mm.
sometimes I do even though podcasts come out once a week, and I've gone twice a week, but that's a whole nother story. I actually record them in advance. So
Yeah.
so you don't have to sit down. My point being is you could sit down and do content on one day a week and
Right.
then schedule it for the whole month if you wanted to.
Yeah. Yeah,
Just change your
absolutely.
clothes. I changed my
Yeah.
shirts.
Right,
But
right. It's not, yeah.
yeah,
It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be
no.
complicated for sure. Or you could have it where you all, like Johnny Cash always wore black. So always
Yeah.
wear a certain color. Like
Yeah. Or
again,
your logo shirt, if it's the same, that's your branding, that's what it is,
yeah.
then
Yeah.
big deal.
Yeah, the clothing police are not going to show up at your door and say you didn't change your shirt and it's the same
No.
same outfit for yeah. Gonna
And
happen.
they're not necessarily looking, well, they could be, but they're not necessarily looking at your clothing and listening to what you're saying.
Exactly. And
If
most
you're giving them
people,
good,
I believe, listen to the podcast and don't watch the video. They actually just listen
much
to it
so,
while
yeah.
they're doing something else.
And
Yeah.
I also agree with that, even though on my YouTube channel, which has really been growing, which is amazing to me, I'm thinking the same thing because I listen to podcasts on YouTube, but I'm not watching it. I just
Hmm.
play it and go do my thing. I
Yeah.
think it's probably just easier. It's more accessible, and I don't have to go to a different. I'm already on YouTube. I don't have to go to Apple Podcast or those other ones out there. It's just right there, and I just do it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
everybody's listening. They're not, and that's the beauty of podcasting.
Yeah. Yeah. That
We're,
is.
we're, we're recording for the reels, really. We're not recording because we think expect people to watch us. We want the
Right.
little snippets
We want
because
the
that's
little
what people watch.
snippets.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Totally agree with that. So, Chris, if someone is interested in getting in touch with you to either hire you to help them let go and stay in the know, or they want to appear on your podcast, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Well, I'm going through some changes. So the best way today would be go to LinkedIn for Chris Gilman or to Facebook for Chris Gilman, connect or message me, and we will get you all squared away.
Fantastic. I love that. And I will be tagging you in when I post this on my LinkedIn newsletter and when I do the reels, you will absolutely be tagged. So that'll be perfect. And of course, I'm also going to send you the recording so that you can use it as well because
I think I will.
yeah, because there's kindness and sharing.
That is right.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again, Chris. This was amazing. I'm so glad we were able to do this. And again, I learn things every time I talk to you, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you so much for
It's been a
being
joy,
on it.
and I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. And
All right.
that is another episode of Making Your Mark. And I will close by saying this: drink a lot of water. That's going to be my PSA today. Drink lots of water. And whatever you are struggling with your digital marketing, if there's something that you think you should be doing and you haven't quite gotten there, it's okay to be resistant. The question is, can you overcome that resistance and at least try it to see if it's just a story in your head and it's actually way easier than you think, or if it's something that maybe you need a little help with. And either way, it's okay because hopefully, like me, you live in the world of multiple right answers. I'm Lisa Apolinsky, and we will see you next time. Bye bye.